morning, Rivers Crossing. How are you? If I had not walk off, come back on, start all over again. If I have not had the honor of meeting you before, my name is Josh. So glad that you're here this morning. If you're checking us out online, thanks for joining us online as always. That was Justin Neff in that video sharing part of his story. Justin and Liz have been attending this church with their family for probably close to 10 years. I'm sure many of you know them or know their kids, and he's just sharing how he had a dream, and the dream kind of took control somewhere along the way. Have any of you ever had a dream? Something you wanted to accomplish? Maybe you were little, something you wanted to grow up and be? All right, the 13 of you, I have something for you. The rest, I hope you liked worship this morning. Do me a favor, I want to be a little interactive this morning, so pull out your iPhone, open up the Notes app. If you have an Android, you can play along. I just have no idea what random app you guys use for notes. Ours is called Notes. Yours is called something that probably works better that Apple will steal and make better and say that they came up with it later. And if you're old school like me, we can go pen and paper this morning. I want you to think of 5 roles or 5 titles that you carry. So for me, like the first one I'm going to write down is father. That's a title that I have. So come up with 5. You can come up with more if you want, but at least 5 titles or roles that define you. I'm going to give you like 30 seconds. I'm going to make a list as well. Making sure everyone's doing it. If you're looking at me, it better be because you're done, not because you're too cool to participate. All right. All right, you got your list? If you don't have it yet, you can keep adding to it. If you think of another one during the morning, you can add to it as well. We're going to use that list a few times this morning. We're going to circle back to it. But today, we're going to continue our series on Ecclesiastes. The goal for this series is not to preach this book cover to cover. We're going to pull some topics out instead. But I'm going to pick up pretty close to where Paul left off last week in the middle of chapter 2. Lots of blue words in this passage of scriptures, and if it's in blue, it's for you. So say the blue words with me. Got a lot of blue words all morning long. Going to preach 4 times today. Get the honor of preaching 4 times today. So give me lots of energy today, all right? All right, let's read this together. And I hated everything I'd accomplished and accumulated on this earth. I can't take it with me. No, I have to leave it to whoever comes after me. Whether they're worthy or worthless, and who's to tell? They'll take over the earthly results of my intense thinking and hard work. Smoke. That's when I called it quits. Gave up on anything that could be hoped for on this earth. What's the point of working your fingers to the bone if you hand over what you've worked for to someone who never lifted a finger for it? Smoke. That's what it is. A bad business from start to finish. So what do you get from a life of hard labor? Pain and grief from dawn to dusk. Never a decent night's rest. Nothing but smoke. The best you can do with your life is have a good time and get by the best you can. That's the way I see it. That's it. Divine fate. Whether we feast or fast, it's up to God. God may give wisdom and knowledge and joy to his favorites, but sinners are assigned a life of hard labor and end up turning their wages over to God's favorites, nothing but smoke and spitting into the wind. Right after that, we get the start of chapter 3, which is all of the time to mourn, a time to die, time to laugh, that whole list. And then at the end of that, Solomon writes, what does the worker gain from his struggles? So there you go, Solomon's thoughts on work. Quit your job, eat, have a drink at Sonder, enjoy your life. And I thought Pastor Paul said Ecclesiastes was going to be depressing. Right? That sounds good to me. Solomon in Ecclesiastes, he bounces around a lot if you've read it, which I know you all have because we've challenged you to, so I'm confident you've all read it at least twice so far. If you read through it, he bounces around. I was joking with Pastor Paul this week. It's a bit like reading the journal of someone who is going through a midlife crisis and actively having a panic attack while writing their thoughts down. So we're going to bounce around a little bit this morning as well, but the main thing I want to talk about is this chase for work, or chasing after work. And I don't mean your work ethic or like hard work, or we'll get to some of that stuff later. I mean, one of these topics right here that you wrote down, are you chasing after one of these? Is one of these titles that describes your work ethic, that describes your career, are you pouring all of your energy into this? That's what we're going to talk about this morning. And because Solomon kind of writes from this place of despair, a little bit negative, I went that way with my notes as well. So I want to talk about what chasing work costs you. And the first thing that I can think of is identity. Chasing work will cost you your identity. And again, we might unpack some of these things about having hard work or a good work ethic or being lazy. And this morning, it's going to apply to wherever you're at in life. If you are a student and you're chasing after those grades, if you're an entrepreneur, a business person, a stay-at-home parent, what's like defining your career is what I want to talk about this morning. What's consuming your energy that you want to be the best at in those moments that's pulling at your identity? Because in the West, in the Western world, especially in America, we have tied our career and our identity so closely together. They're almost the same thing, right? We ask people pretty early on in meeting them, what do you do for a living? We tied them so closely together. Now, historically, you used to get your career from your parents. Like if your dad was a carpenter, you became a carpenter. That sort of thing worked down for generations. Now the secondary education boom means kids can go chase a degree, they can get educated that way, they can do whatever they want, which is great because you can chase passions, but chasing those passions often leads us into chasing work even harder and more wrapping up our identity into our career even further. Ann Wilson, she's a psychology professor, she has this to say about that process. If you tie your self-worth to your career, the successes and failures you experience will directly affect your self-worth. Has anyone ever heard the word enmeshment before? All right, my wife's a therapist, so it's like being married to a word of the day calendar sometimes. I just learn all these big words, and I just kind of nod along and pretend I know what she's saying, and then I'm Googling later to figure out what half of what she said was. This enmeshment is when roles inside of a family start to become blurred. So a scenario that happens often is, think of a family unit, and the mom tragically passes away, and now the teenage daughter takes on some of her role. So she's fixing dinner some, helping littles get ready for school, things like that. And somewhere along the way, her roles become enmeshed together, and her identity kind of gets lost in the process. I was reading a psychologist this week who was talking about work and kind of this balance between work and personal lives. And he said because of the development of laptops at first and then our smart technology over here, work from home culture, that our lines between personal and work have become so blurred that our roles are actually starting to become enmeshed together. And it's hard to actually tell who you are in the moment. Am I dad right now? Am I pastor right now? Am I worker right now? It's hard to tell. And he had 3 questions I want to give to you. And answering these questions, you answer yes to 2 or all 3 of these questions, you might have to do some evaluating of if some of your titles and roles in life are starting to get enmeshed together. Here's the 3 questions. First one, do you think about work even when you are not at work? Number 2, when your mind has time to think about anything, is work often the first thing that comes up? Number 3, do you typically bring up work within the first 3 minutes of a conversation? Oh, I just saw like 2 heads over here that were like, I don't know if you felt convicted or if you were extending conviction. If you answered yes to 2 or 3 of those, you might need to kind of struggle with some of the roles in your life. Am I in work mode when I'm supposed to be in dad mode? All right, one more psychologist quote for my fellow logical, mental, nerdy people in the room. It's another psychologist who says, inevitably, something will happen. There will be layoffs, a recession, your company will be acquired, and suddenly your job isn't what it used to be. It becomes really existential for people. They have poor coping strategies because it's earth-shattering. So it becomes depression, anxiety, even substance abuse. Chasing work, chasing after it, wraps your identity up so closely into it that your self-worth is given away. You're giving your self-worth to something. And if that something shakes, so does your self-worth. I'm still telling people when they ask me what I do for a living that I was an engineer for 20 years before I quit and became a pastor. That was a little over 2 years ago. Why am I telling people that? They're not asking for my resume. They just want to know what I do for a living. And I'm still bringing up this former career. I was on a fly fishing trip 2 weeks ago with a bunch of guys. It's 8 pastors. We're all pastors on this trip. And I still told all of them, yeah, I used to be an engineer. What need in my life am I satisfying by bringing up a former career? How is my identity still wrapped up in a former career somehow? I want to read that same passage of Ecclesiastes again. I picked a different translation. Lots of blue again. Stay with me. I hated all my work and labored at under the sun. Oh, you weren't ready. You weren't ready. You were thinking about work, weren't you? All right, here we go. I hated all my work that I labored at under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who comes after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool, yet he will take over all my work that I labored at skillfully under the sun. This too is futile. So I began to give myself over to despair concerning all my work that I labored at under the sun. When there is a man whose work was done with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and he must give his portion to a man who has not worked for it, this too is futile and a great wrong. For what does a man get with all his work and all his efforts that he labored at under the sun? For all his days are filled with grief, and his occupation is sorrowful. Even at night his mind does not rest. This too is futile. There is nothing better for a man than to eat, have a sonder beer, and enjoy his work. I have seen that even this from God's hand, because who can eat and who can enjoy life apart from him? For to the man who is pleasing in his sight, he gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy, but to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and accumulating in order to give to the one who is pleasing in God's sight. This too is futile and a pursuit of the wind. Do you have your list of titles, of roles? You have this somewhere? Read down through these. Which ones are just laboring at earthly things under the sun that don't actually matter? Listen, if you wrote down child of God, follower of Christ, you get extra credit today, all right? You can just play a game on your phone the rest of the service. You figured this part out. Now understand, that's not a role you play, that's your identity. So that shouldn't even be on this list. That's just who you are. These roles are dependent on someone or something else. So if you wrote that down, great job. The Holy Spirit's revealing something to you in your life, but that shouldn't even be on this list. These are roles. I'm only a father because I have kids. That's what this list is. It's a little bit more fragile than that. We're going to take this list to the next level. You ready? All right. You're going to rate yourself 1 to 5 on each of these. Not ranking them, you're just going to rate yourself. 1 is bad, 5 is great. Take 10 seconds and rate yourself. Spouses, do not comment on your spouse's card. In a perfect world, you would be all 4s and 5s. But in reality, none of us have the energy or capacity to pull that off. So we have to limit. So if you really want to lean into this later, give yourself 15 points to dole out instead of 25, because 15 is probably the energy that you have. And then where are you putting those points? For some people, I've had seasons of life where work still would have got 5, and now I've got 10 points to give out to the rest of them. So wrestle with that later. How would you divide those up? And then do one more step. Where would I want these to be? How would I want these to sort out? Doug Fields is a youth pastor at a very large church in California for a number of years, and he had this to say about chasing work. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't work hard, but I am suggesting that if you are defining your value by the chase, by your ambitions, your work, and your achievement, then you are simply chasing after the wind, and ultimately, it is meaningless. Now, I still think hard work should be applauded. There are a lot of scriptures that praise strong work and determination and work ethic and all those things. So I'm not preaching a message to go be lazy at all. But if your identity is becoming wrapped up in your work, some of you don't know who you are if you lost this thing. And you've built great things. People in this room have built great things. You've built companies, you have built businesses, you have built families on your hard work. But you don't know who you would be without that because it's gotten so much of your energy and so much of your focus. Chasing your identity or chasing work devalues your influence in your home. My father's dad passed away when he was like 8 or 9, and then he lived with different family members until he bought his first house at 16 or 17. Hardest working man I've ever known in my entire life. Had a good job at GM, still worked at night preparing taxes for people. Had 2 jobs, didn't need it. Still chose to work 2 jobs. Hard work was the language spoken in the household that I grew up in. Rest was a sin in the Pocock household growing up. And some of you were thinking, good, and yeah, I'll learn my work ethic from that man. But now I'm a teenager and I'm starting to explore parts of my faith, and I had a conversation with my dad, and he's trying to explain things to me like mercy and grace and forgiveness, and I can't even process them. Jesus can't forgive me unless I earn that. I have to work for that. How could God bless me unless I do something for him, unless I work hard enough for him to bless me? It didn't matter what my dad told me in that moment. What he had taught me was that hard work is the only way to get a reward. So what are you teaching the little ones in your lives? Because no one in our next gen wing can tell them about grace and mercy and forgiveness and rest. You can't even tell them about it. You have to model it for them. You have to show it to them. Solomon writes Ecclesiastes. In the book before Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, he says this about kids. Teach a youth the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it. The teaching part there is not an option. You are doing it whether you want to or not. You are showing these kids how to grow up and what to be. So what are you teaching them to chase? Are you teaching them to chase what they're good at like you are? Are you chasing a career? Are you chasing your work so strongly that they're learning to chase? Or are you teaching them to chase after the heart of God? Because we finish out Proverbs, we get all through the first 11 chapters of Ecclesiastes where Solomon basically calls all that stuff meaningless. And then at the end of Ecclesiastes, he tells us what we should be teaching our kids. 12:13, he says this. When all has been heard, the conclusion of the matter is fear God and keep his commands, because this is for all humanity. So moms, dads, stepmoms, stepdads, godparents, future parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles, what are you modeling to chase for the kids in your life? Because I've tried to think of how do we even get here in the Western culture where our identity is so tied to our work? And I think it's because we teach kids as low as 3 that it should be. When we ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? So they learn. I want to be this career. So we wrap our identity up in our career, and then we teach that to our kids, that they should do the same. Chasing work robs you of tension. We often view tension as bad. Tension can be very good. A friend of mine just said to me recently, tension isn't bad. Tension holds up bridges. Tension can be what holds your life in balance. What do I mean by that? I mean, whenever something comes up on a Sunday morning, does church always lose? Have you ever said, we can't go to that because we have church in the morning? I can't schedule that business meeting on Monday morning. I could do Monday afternoon or Tuesday. Is there any tension there? Or is church just cut like a dentist appointment you can reschedule? They got another one coming around next week. I'll just catch that one. For us, 2 years ago, my oldest son, Malachi, would have been 10. His football schedule came out for this season. He had 2 games on a Sunday morning, and I told him, pick one game to go to and pick one game to skip. You can skip church for one game, and then you'll skip one game for church. Not putting that on you. That was our decision. That's how we chose to live in the tension of that. And he was good with it because he loves being here. If you're in RC Kids ministry, you've probably seen him. At Kids serves everywhere. He loves being here. And I say that, and I'll tell you, I will never be the person that gets on this stage to demonize kids' sports and youth activities because I have a daughter in highly competitive gymnastics. Guess what day all of her meets are on? Sundays. My youngest son, vocal lessons and dramas, play practice, Sundays. The plays, Sundays. My 12-year-old, Malachi, fall baseball, football, basketball, spring baseball, and a summer league basketball. If you were in that season of life with me, I get it. You have all of my empathy. And if you're past this season of life and you survived it, you are my inspiration and hope that I will get there, that I will make it. And if your kids are young or you don't have kids yet, don't ever sit around and say, I'm bored, I wish we had something to do tonight, because these little monsters are coming for your calendar. So just enjoy the rest. I'm just saying, live in the tension. Live in the tension. Don't write off church so quickly that it's so easy to be like, well, we got a sports thing, so we got to go. If you teach your kids, I'm going to get emails this week. If you teach your kids it's okay to miss church and for you also to miss church for 3 months to go chase this sport, don't be surprised if in 10 years you're back here asking for someone to pray over your now adult kid because for some reason, church just doesn't seem important to them. Why would it be? You taught them to chase something else. If they see you chasing work, they're going to chase. If your expectation for them is to go chase, go be the best shortstop, go be the best middle linebacker, go be the best actor, go be the best gymnast, if that's your expectation for your kid, they will grow up to go be the best stay-at-home parent, the best teacher, the best engineer, at whatever the cost. And if you taught them chasing along the way to go be the best whatever was missing church in the process, guess what they'll do as an adult? Teach a youth in the ways he will grow. You're doing it whether you want to or not. You are teaching them how to be an adult. It's not a fun season of life. Live in the tension. I am far, far from a perfect parent. My wife and I have figured this tension part out. My son, my 12-year-old, he has baseball practice this morning from 10 to 11. He will leave the baseball field at 11. He will come straight here, and he will change into his RC Kids shirt because at noon, he'll be teaching first graders about Jesus. We'll go home, we'll eat dinner. He'll come back with me, and he'll attend Tribes Junior High at 5 p.m. with some of his friends. We didn't ask him to do any of that. He loves to serve, and he wants to go to the ministry that's built for him. He wants to be here. We modeled that for him, and now it's just most on autopilot. It's what he wants to do. And at the same time, my daughter had the opportunity to spend the night at a friend's house last night. And because I'm here, my wife's running a kid to baseball, she doesn't have a ride to church this morning. She serves at the 5 p.m., so she said, even though she's in senior high, so her service is on Wednesday nights, but she still likes to come to the morning service. She said, well, I guess I can't go to this sleepover, or otherwise I'll miss church in the morning. And we said, no. You haven't missed a service in 6 or 8 months. Go honor your friend. Go to this sleepover. So she's watching one of these services online. I highly doubt the 8:45, but she's watching one of them. Or she'll watch it tomorrow, and that's okay too, because it's not legalism I'm trying to give you. It's not be in church 52 Sundays a year or else. No. If your kid wants to do sports and there's tension there along the way, live in the tension. Don't just say, nope, can't do that sport, but don't also say, nah, church is no big deal. We'll watch it at the ball field. We'll talk about it later. Okay. Live in the tension. Find the balance. Take a family vacation and then watch the message while you're on vacation. Sit down with your kids and talk about it. You get Bengals tickets and you want to just make a Sunday out of it with your family? Go make a Sunday out of it with your family. But does church ever win? Have you ever told your kids, no, we're going to be at church? Last thing I'll say, then I'll get off my youth sports soapbox. Solomon says this in Ecclesiastes. Hated's a strong word, right? That's one of those words we tell our little ones, like, don't say that word. I hated all my work that I labored at under the sun because I must leave it to the man who comes after me. How about this? How about we stop chasing after earthly things under the sun and that pursuit that we just leave for someone, and instead we chase after the heart of God, and that's what we give to our kids. And I get it. You don't think I would love for Malachi to chase after the heart of God while also being a second baseman for the Cleveland Guardians? Or middle linebacker for the Green Bay Packers? I would love it. Those are passions that he has. But I want him chasing the heart of God. And our calendar reflects that. Last thing I got for you. The chase only ends when you stop. There are people in this room, I know you've convinced yourself that the work chase ends at the next promotion. It does not. It doesn't end when the kids get back to school. It doesn't end when the next sports season is over. It just doesn't end until eventually you say, I'm done chasing. That's when it stops. I want to show you the second half of Justin's testimony And just know that anyone who's sharing their heart during this series, it doesn't mean they're a perfect person or they have figured life out. It just means they were vulnerable enough to share with their church family, I was chasing something, and it was costing me a lot, and now I've pivoted, and I'm just trying to chase after the heart of God. Justin's going to share something in this video, and I had the honor of knowing him before the brewery when it was just a dream. And I've heard Justin share this story 50 times, that he got this vision from God, that one night he's just kind of cleaning up at the bar, and he's wiping down the counter, and somebody sitting there a little bit late just says, hey, what's that tattoo? And Justin has a conversation about Jesus with him. Or like, hey, Sonder means everyone has a story. What's your story? And Justin gets to share Jesus. I mean, he's just shared this over and over and over again. He's had this vision multiple times from God so strongly that he believes God's even given him the name of the person that he's going to share his faith with. So when he mentions Corey in this video, know that this is Justin getting back to a place when the dream that he had for this brewery was about chasing the heart of God and not chasing work. Check this out.
As you are now pivoting, what would you say, if you had to define it somehow, what would you say you're chasing now?
Corey. From a business perspective, I'm chasing what God wants this place to be and has from the beginning. I still haven't met Corey, even though, like I said, it was such a vivid conversation with God that I know his name. I just hope I didn't miss him, because I wasn't honoring God and what this place was supposed to be for a period of time. Why would God have presented him to me when I didn't have the heart ready to ask the question?
Well, for you, if he would have presented to you then, it would have been success.
That's right.
Did it?
There's a chance I don't meet Corey for 20 years. But I'm chasing that. I'm chasing my family and trying to be with them as much as possible. This place will always be in a busy season.
Sure.
And so why would I sacrifice everything else to put myself in the middle of that? So I'm chasing the busyness of my family. I'm chasing my wife, more so now than ever. And, doing things like taking my kids to golf lessons, and this place will always be here. And I would say I'm chasing them more than I'm chasing anything else.
I'm going to take communion in a minute, but first I want to share a story with you. Does anyone remember the Amanda Knox story from 2007, that whole situation? If you don't, she's an American student. She was living in Italy, got accused of murdering her roommate in Italy, and it was a weird story. The evidence was weird. The whole story was weird, and it was just worldwide news for a very long time. She was eventually freed and released, and even then the story wasn't over, but there was a point when she first got convicted and was sentenced to prison. And I was listening to an interview with her recently where she says right after that moment, she was sitting in her jail cell and she had an epiphany in that moment. She had always lived her life during that season as coulds and shoulds. I could get out of here. I shouldn't be here. I could. I will. When this is over, I'll be able to. I will. I could. Just all these coulds and shoulds. And in that moment, she stopped and realized that her life wasn't could or should. It was. And the reality for her was that her life was sad. So that's my challenge for you this morning. The busyness of your life, the chasing after work, take away the could and the should and the will. Look at it today, right now. Evaluate your life right now in this moment. Is it out of balance? Are you chasing something that's not the heart of the Father? Are some of you sitting there right now so anxious for the service to be over because you're already ready to get back to the calendar and back to the schedule? If that's you this morning, that you just feel like, man, I've just been chasing work a ton, I've got one last scripture to leave you with. Jesus says this in John. He says, the Spirit is the one who gives life. The flesh doesn't help at all. Stop chasing the earthly, under the sun pursuits that don't matter, that have no life, that are meaningless, and that eventually you give away to someone else anyway. And instead, start chasing the heart of the Father, and then model that for the people that are in your lives. So we're going to take communion together. These are in your cup holders. We always ask that if you're not a follower of Christ yet, that this is a moment where you just sit and observe. No one's going to judge you or think anything about you. But I'm thankful that we serve a God who didn't model striving and chasing, he modeled sacrifice. There was a moment before Jesus went to the cross. On that very night, he gathered his closest followers, his closest friends together, and they had dinner. They ate and drank. And at some point during that meal, he took bread, and he blessed it, and he broke it. And then he told his followers, this represents my body that is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Let's take the body together. And it says, in the same manner, he took wine. And after blessing that, he said, this represents the new covenant that we are so thankful for. That this wine represents blood that will be spilled out for us. He told us again, every time we do this, to do this in remembrance of him. Let's take this together. Thank you, Jesus. We're going to close by singing a song that I think kind of summarizes this morning really well, and I think it even pulls communion into it, because I want to celebrate that sacrifice and also reset my own perspective on what I actually chase in life. Before I invite you to stand, I lied to you. I have one more nerdy therapist quote, because after I went over my message with my wife, she had one more thing to say, and it was just so good, I had to give it to you as well. Here's what my wife had to say. All titles and roles are fleeting except for being a child of God. Life can change in a moment and take one of those roles from us. So if any of those titles are where you're finding your identity, you're in trouble, because that whole sheet of titles is chasing the wind. Church, our identity is found in this moment. It is found in being a child of the one true King. And at the end of the day, it's the one thing we should chase. We don't need anything else. Will you stand and sing with me?